I see, Chris. Let me see if I can maybe...
There was a fringe.
Oh.
Long before there was a fringe, we were called yahoos. And Mr. Chris Guy started the movement on the front lawn
Let's see if I can snag Mr.
of
Chris.
Queen's Park.
Because they got rid of the mask mandates in most settings a few weeks ago, and everything's going back to normal. It couldn't be further from the truth. First of all, if you saw the news today, 3 of the top doctors, which means the most paid off by the government to spell government propaganda and lies, are calling for the reinstitution of the mask mandate. They already reinstituted in Ottawa schools for every single age group, and also called, what do they call them? Insecure spaces, indoor spaces in Ottawa. So that's already happened. And over here in Niagara Falls, literally on one side of the street, employees aren't wearing masks, and on the other side of the street, I'm talking about Clifton Hill, right here, right where we are, they're not wearing masks on one side, but they're still mandated to wear masks on the other side. That's how ridiculous this is. That's how divided it is, and that's what they want. They want us divided. They want to divide us between mask wearer, non-mask wearer, vaccinated, non-vaccinated. And the mask was pretty easy to trick everybody because it's not that much of a big deal for most people to put a mask on their face when they go in a store and come out. But when you're telling someone to take an injection of an unknown substance, and then they see as more and more people taking these injections, more and more people are getting sick, and now we're at the point that virtually every single person, like 90+% of the people that are in hospital for COVID-related symptoms have been double or triple vaccinated in this country. Countries like Israel, which are already on their 4th shot, have canceled the vaccine, and you won't hear that over here in Canada. And why are they canceling it? Because of what I've been warning people about for over a year now, that every single vaccine of this type that you get, it lowers your immune system by damaging your white blood cell count. And then every single time you get another jab, it lowers it more, it lowers it more. And let's talk about the jabs for a second. I'm going to bring this up in my thing. They told you it was safe. They told you it was effective. And then all of a sudden, AstraZeneca was so not safe and so not effective that they had to ban it. But that didn't stop them from injecting you and your children with it until people started dying to the point where they couldn't cover it up, so they had to ban it. Then Moderna got banned for people under 30 in many countries. Now, just yesterday, the FDA severely limited the emergency use authorization for the so-called safe and effective Johnson & Johnson vaccine because of blood clots and thrombosis. And if you remember at the start of this pandemic, all the people that were dying in Italy, when they were cutting them open, they were saying they were all dying of thrombosis. So this is giving people the same symptoms that was killing people at the start of COVID. So now we have 3 of the 4 vaccines that have all been either banned or severely limited in segments of the population. And what are they telling you? Now they want to inject your 5-year-old, even your 6-month-old with this garbage. And believe you me, if there were enough stupid Canadians that they got 60-70% of us to take the booster, they would have already changed the definition of fully vaccinated from 2 shots to 3 shots. They don't care about your health. They don't care about your safety. It's all about control. Justin Trudeau wants to keep travel mandates in place for another 3 years. This is a guy that pretends like he's following the science when the science all around the world states that they don't need masks on planes, they don't need mandates for travel, they don't need mandates for work, and more countries are even finding these mandates unconstitutional. But apparently here in Canada, our science is special, our science is different, and the only way Canadians can be safe is if we submit without asking any questions and without following any real science to the whim of a dictator that can't even add 13+7 without having to think about it for 5 minutes. And that's a reality. He actually admitted that on TV, that he has a learning disability. He even says, all the small, quick calculations that you do thousands of times a day without even thinking about it, those are really hard for me. And this is the man that's supposed to be making decisions about running the country. This is the man that you're letting you tell when you're going to see your family, what you're going to put on your kid's face, or what you're going to put in your child's body. And you're listening to this complete buffoon that has no political authority, no moral authority, no legal authority, and he's getting more and more embarrassed every single day on the international stage. Look what he did in Parliament yesterday. He got so flustered he called an F-bomb and ran out of there like a little baby. But that's what he is. He's a little baby bitch in a 50-year-old pedophile's body. And that's all he is. He's not a leader, he's not a prime minister, and he definitely ain't a politician. He's a puppet. You can literally see the strings on his ass, on his back, and you can see them moving his mouth with their hands. He couldn't even answer a question without his earpiece. So forget Justin Trudeau, forget this whole thing. I just came back from Montreal.
We got to help those people because the Quebecers, a lot of them that don't speak English, which is virtually everyone outside of Montreal, they only get French media. And I did a French language interview over there, and they were showing me all the French language media. And the most well-respected journalists with like decades of experience are literally calling for vaccinated people to be rounded up, vaccinated people to have all their property stolen, vaccinated people to be literally rounded up and forcibly vaccinated against their will. And this is stuff that's in the mainstream media every day. So the culture of fear in that city is insane. They still wore mask mandates. They were supposed to go on April 30th. I was there May 1st, and we had 100,000 people in the march. And it was called La Fin du Mass, the end of mass. And guess what? It wasn't the end of mass. They extended it for another 2 weeks. And we were actually getting kicked out of places for not having a mask. And I have a doctor-prescribed medical exemption. They don't care over there. And when you showed someone in Montreal, if you ask them, oh, did you get, you could even ask them if they got sick after being vaccinated. They would say yes. And I would say, that tells you that the vaccine's not safe. And that tells you that if you do it again, you're probably going to have more problems. You know what every single one of them said? I don't care. I don't want to believe it. So when you can get inside someone's head and traumatize them and abuse them to the point where they will deny reality, they will deny logic, reason, and common sense, they are so easy to manipulate through fear. And that's what we're seeing. And I never saw it anywhere worse in Canada than in Montreal. They are severely isolated there because of the lack of English speaking and the lack of other being able to, like, they can't watch American news, so they don't see that all the mandates are getting struck down in the U.S. They don't see the mandates getting struck down in all these other European countries. They only see what's going on in France, which is just as bad as there, and there. So we got to help those guys. They don't want to separate from Canada. They're Canadians like everybody else. And until we get Quebec free, the rest of us aren't going to be free. As for Ontario, we're in Niagara tonight. We're in Windsor tomorrow. We're in Toronto on Sunday. The return to Dundas Square. And we need to get everybody on board. Guys, you thought it was over? Give me a break. The mask mandates are going to get reinstated right in the summertime. Right when there's no COVID, nobody's sick, everybody trying to have a good time. And then by the fall, if they don't have you on the third shot, they're going to tell you they have a brand new vaccine, and everybody's going to have to start over and start a new succession of vaccines with this brand new vaccine that's more safe and more effective and works on all the variants. That's going to be the lie in the fall if we don't do anything. They just passed Bill 100 in Ontario. That was the anti-protest bill. That was basically like a mini emergency act for Ontario forever without them having to declare an emergency. Now, if you do types of protests where they don't like, where they say you block critical infrastructure, they can freeze your bank accounts, take your house, take your cars, do all the same nasty shit without any charges even, and without any recourse to you, just like they did under the Emergency Act, without having to declare an emergency, and that is now in law forever in Ontario. They took a huge chunk of your freedom. Now they want to do it online with Bill C-11. They want to control everything that goes online. You think the fact checkers are bad now? You think the Facebook jail is bad now? You think the friggin' disclaimers are bad now? You think getting shadow banned is bad now? Just wait, ladies and gentlemen. And they're prepping all of this for the digital ID. Yes, I know that sounds ominous. It's not just a friggin' license or passport that's going to be online and easily accessible so you don't have to carry it in your wallet. No, it's going to have everything about you. Do you have a criminal record? That's on there. Do you have debt? That's on there. Your credit score? That's on there. Have you ever been charged with DUI? That's on there. Are you a trans? That's on there. Are you homosexual? That's on there. Do you have HIV? That's on there. Have you been vaccinated for COVID? That's on there. I can go on and on and on and on. And it's going to be tied to your fingerprint and your iris scan for facial recognition. That is complete control. And they're already setting up people to go along with it willingly. My friends in the UK are calling me when they go to a grocery store and they try to spend $30 on their debit card to buy some groceries. They'll get it declined, and then they'll get a text message from their bank where they have to put in a special code just so the bank can verify their identity. So they're already setting you up for the idea that your phone and everything else is not good enough to identify yourself. And if they can trick you into going along with it for banking, and that's what they're doing. You can go on your big bank's webpage, RBC, Bank of Montreal, just type in the name on Google and digital ID. It's all there. Certain schools in BC are even forcing people to sign up for digital ID before they can even sign up. And if you do, If you do voluntarily, just like the COVID vaccine, after 60-70% of the people do it, it won't be voluntary, it'll be mandatory. And not just for the banks, it's going to be mandatory for everything you do. You won't even be able to access your online internet connection, let alone make a Facebook or Instagram account, let alone have an eBay or Kijiji account, let alone have access to your email. None of that will be possible if you are not part of the digital ID system. And part of the digital ID system is going to be complying with all their vaccines that they're going to force on you and all their climate change agenda. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They know a pandemic can only last for so long. So once they got you into the idea that you needed to give up your rights and freedoms temporarily for the good of your health and safety, now they're going to make you give up your rights and freedoms permanently for the good of the health and safety of the planet. That's the next scam. They're going to tell you how the lockdowns and all the lack of human activity actually helped save us from climate change. So that's going to be added into your digital ID. They're going to have to track and trace all the resources you use, how much water you use, how much electricity you use, how much gas you use, how far do you travel every day. And if you go over their limits, you're going to be taxed or you're going to be limited, all for the greater good. That is where this is headed. And we're not talking about years, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about months. The Government of Canada, the World Economic Forum, Air Canada, the airport in Canada, KLM Airlines, and their counterpart at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam are already making this digital ID pact for air travel. And if it gets passed, Trudeau's air travel mandates with vaccines won't just last for 3 years until he gets kicked out of office. They will be enshrined in international law forever. And while all this is going on, they're meeting at the WHO this month, and they've drafted what they're calling a treaty, which they're calling a global pandemic constitution. That once your government and your country signs onto, the WHO takes authority over your country, and they get to make all the decisions. And now if you're breaching their COVID laws, you're breaching international law. So there's more serious consequences. And now you have even less transparency from your elected officials and even less accountability from your public health officials. So it gives them even more power, more control over your life. And things like the U.S. Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights get thrown in the toilet the moment they declare we're in a pandemic. And if you haven't noticed, they're telling you right now that you're in a 6th or 7th wave of a pandemic. A pandemic where the only people that are sick are the ones that have taken the vaccine. It's that simple. So how does this end? Why do you think I'm wearing this? It says, just say no. That's all you gotta do. When they tell you to put the mask back on, which they're going to do, you just say no. When they tell you to take a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th vaccine, you just say no. When they tell you you need mandates in your life and you need to close your business, you just say no. And when everybody individually fights that fight for freedom, that's all you need to do. Your fight is to just say no. It's my fight to go around everywhere, talk, tell the truth, meet people, get arrested 20 times, go to jail, go to prison, get beat up, get threatened, etc. All you gotta do is simply say no. Don't put a mask on you. Don't put a mask on your children. Don't put a jab in you. Don't put a jab in your children. It's that easy for you. And when we do that, we'll be free like virtually every other country around the world is. And then we can move on to phase 3, holding these people accountable. Because the last thing we want is to get our freedoms back and then just have a big celebration and a party without any of these people getting charged, any of these people getting arrested, any of these companies getting fined. They all need to be held accountable for these massive crimes against humanity and made examples of, so this can never happen again.